Welcome to the Explainer, everyone. Today, we're exploring one of the absolute most fascinating and, frankly, totally paradoxical aspects of human behavior. I mean, have you ever noticed how, under really intense pressure, the exact same traits that make us brilliant can suddenly just flip and start working against us? It's wild. So today, we're going to unpack the hidden survival patterns our brains and bodies rely on when the demands of life just keep piling up. And look, this isn't just another talk about stress. It's about decoding the highly intelligent, deeply protective systems we all have and figuring out how we can finally understand them. To kick things off, let's consider a real puzzle. Why does a highly competent midlife woman, the type, someone who handles her career effortlessly, anticipates every single family need, and keeps the entire household running like absolute clockwork, why does she suddenly feel completely disconnected from her own identity? I mean, outwardly, she is a machine of pure capability. But inwardly, she might feel totally flat, resentful, or honestly, almost entirely absent from her own life. Because burnout doesn't always look like some dramatic visible collapse. Sometimes it just looks like getting every single thing done perfectly, but quietly not feeling like yourself anymore. Now, hold that thought for a second. Let's completely switch gears to a wildly different scenario. Why is it that incredibly smart people will absolutely freeze up when they try to speak a new language? Like they know the vocabulary, they've completely aced the grammar tests, but the very second they have to speak in real time, boom, their brain just completely locks down. It feels like a massive failure of intelligence, right? So what on earth could a highly capable woman experiencing identity burnout possibly have in common with a student who's completely paralyzed by second language anxiety? Well, the answer lies in a really powerful unifying secret. The pattern is protective before it is expensive. In both of these cases, what we so often shame as a personal flaw, a defect, or some sort of deep-seated pathology is actually a highly intelligent survival adaptation. The student freezing up and the woman overfunctioning are both using incredible built-in assets to protect themselves from pressure. But here's the catch. Over time, those protective adaptations start costing them incredibly dearly. Okay, let's dive into this scientific baseline we call adaptive calibration. Because our stress response isn't just some random panicky alarm bell, it's actually a highly intelligent multifunctional calibration system. When you are repeatedly exposed to really high demands, your system literally adjusts. It learns to prioritize handling those exact demands over your own internal recovery. So your behavior isn't defective at all. It is perfectly calibrated for survival based on the very specific high-pressure environment you're navigating. So here's our quick roadmap for the explainer. We'll decode this hidden survival pattern and map out the TAM framework. And then we're going to apply it directly to those two very distinct case studies before wrapping up with how to actually reclaim your mastery. All right, Section 1, the hidden survival pattern, and why our absolute best assets turn against us. Traditional literature around stress loves to treat our reactions purely as symptoms of something being broken. But honestly, that completely misses the genius logic of our adaptations. Think about it for a second. What feels completely normal to you right now might just be a stress calibration, not your true baseline. If your environment is constantly teaching your nervous system that responding to external demands matters way more than your own internal recovery, your system is going to learn to prioritize that relentless output. Overload literally becomes your accepted normal state. Actually, scratch that. It becomes your required normal state. You might be calibrated for survival in a way that is currently costing you way too much, but make no mistake, it was incredibly intelligent when it first started. Moving right along, Section 2, decoding the TAM framework, which is basically our universal decoder for human behavior. To really map out this overload chain, we use the TAM framework. TAM stands for Trigger, Adaptation, and Mastery, and it breaks down into 4 really clear sequential parts. First up is the trigger. This is the pressure context or the specific environmental demand pushing on you. Second is the adaptation. This is your survival asset, the intelligent, built-in way you naturally try to handle that trigger. Third is the cost. This is the dangerous bridge where your adaptation goes unregulated and turns into a dysregulation risk. And finally, fourth is mastery, which is taking that exact same protective intelligence and intentionally turning it into a regulated target or skill. Okay, Section 3, Case 1. Let's look at language anxiety in what we call the Raven overbuild. So what actually creates the pressure context for a language learner? Imagine staring at a screen or sitting right across from a native speaker. You are facing the complete uncertainty of real-time speaking, this intense, looming fear of negative judgment, and really heavy correction pressure. This immense pressure immediately activates a brilliant survival asset, high pattern detection. We affectionately call it the raven asset, kind of like the bird constantly scanning its environment for tiny signals and threats. These folks are amazing at extracting grammar rules and mapping out patterns, but under intense pressure, they massively overuse it. And this brilliantly illustrates the fork in the road. Left entirely unregulated, the cost is crippling perfectionism. We're talking about translating an entire, highly complex English thought in their head before daring to speak a single word aloud. It is literally an avoidance strategy heavily disguised as intelligence. But mastery isn't about stopping that intelligence or pretending they don't see those patterns, right? It's about regulating it into a sustainable skill. Just speak one short sentence, add one single detail, and then stop. Use a quick repair line if you get stuck, instead of completely escaping the conversation. It's the exact same Raven intelligence, just safely and intentionally regulated. All right, Section 4, Case 2. Let's talk about identity burnout and the true hidden cost of competence. Now, the trigger here, it's usually not a single dramatic crisis. No, it's chronic, sustained overload. It's the sheer accumulation of invisible labor. The running mental checklist of grocery runs, scheduling doctor's appointments, maintaining every relationship, and constantly anticipating everyone else's moods, all with practically zero margin for personal recovery. And then, this is so often compounded by huge hormonal shifts like perimenopause. To solve this overwhelming math problem, the nervous system naturally adapts by tightening around usefulness. The person essentially becomes an absolute master of anticipatory care and total reliable containment, just to keep the whole system from completely dropping. But, as we know, the bill always comes due. Burnout becomes identity loss when functioning outlives self-contact. I mean, wow, that just hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? That is the devastating cost phase in the TAM framework. Constantly anticipating others' needs and constantly deferring your own to smooth out the friction leads to a literal thinning of your own identity. You remain visibly incredibly competent to every single person in the room while quietly, desperately losing access to your own preferences, your own emotions, and your fundamental sense of self. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how we actually convert this into mastery. Unregulated, this looks like relentless anticipatory care without any endpoint whatsoever, which leads straight into total overfunctioning. But remember, the protective trait itself, high-functioning care, is a beautiful, necessary strength. It protects families, it holds teams together, it builds careers. Mastery means converting that exact strength into a regulated skill. It is care with limits. It requires explicit handoffs of visible labor, truly protected rituals where you actually pause and check in with yourself, and selective prioritization so your own needs don't just keep getting endlessly shoved to the back burner. Which brings us to Section 5, reclaiming your sustainable mastery, and moving from mere survival to actual thriving. When we pull back and look at these together, the parallels are just incredible. The raving overbuild we see in language anxiety is mechanically identical to the usefulness-first containment we see in midlife burnout. I mean, look at them side by side here. Both start with an intense load or valuation pressure. Both rely on an absolutely incredible survival asset, whether that's elite pattern detection or anticipatory care. Both result in a devastating cost, like avoidance or identity loss. And both find mastery not by trying to eliminate the asset, but by regulating those brilliant traits into clear, boundary-protected skills. Mastery is not less care. It is care with a stopping rule. You see, merely functioning is simply not the same thing as thriving. True thriving absolutely requires a recoverable stress load. You don't need to suddenly abandon your responsibilities or try to kill off your brilliant traits to save yourself. You just need conditions that allow your sense of self to actually survive. And practically, that means fewer invisible tasks, really explicit limits, and recovery that happens before you collapse, rather than using recovery as some desperate last resort. So I'm going to leave you all with this final provocative thought. If your current survival strategy, the very thing that makes you so incredibly capable, is starting to cost you your identity, what would regulated mastery look like for you tomorrow? It all starts with recognizing your own hidden pattern, removing the shame around it, and mapping your early, lower drag path right back to yourself. Keep exploring, stay curious, and hey, start recalibrating toward your own sustainable mastery today. Thanks for joining us.